on another PTE passage. So this is also a question from the one of the renowned websites, web portals, right? You can even check the portal on screen, right? Yeah. Yeah. So you can post the video and try to look through this passage and try to understand it as much as you can. However, I'm going to explain the overall meaning and exact meaning of sentences of the passage. So let's get started. So as I have gone through this passage, I could understand that. So there is a man, Luke Howard, who enjoyed studying clouds and weather, you know, since his childhood. He thought that clouds could be classified into groups because they had different shapes and sizes. And Howard gave these groups special names and wrote down his ideas so other people could learn about them more clearly. He also found that cities can change the weather, like making more fog, creating more fog or something, due to the dynamics and the things could can affect the weather patterns, right? Yeah. Luke Howard's ideas about clouds became very popular and used by many people all over the world. That's the overall meaning of the passage. Let's discuss meaning of individual sentences more clearly. Right. The first sentence. So before Luke Howard invented his system for classifying clouds, they had simply here the first sentence, no? They had simply been described by their shape and color as each person saw them. They were too changeable and moved too quickly for anyone to think they could be classified in any useful way. Okay. Before Luke Howard came up with a special way to name clouds, everyone just talked about clouds by describing what they looked like and what color they were in, right? People thought clouds changed too much, and moved too fast to put them into different groups or types. They're too fast to look through and name them. Next, the second sentence. Yeah. Howard had been interested in clouds and meteorology in general ever since he was a small boy, and for 30 years kept a record of his meteorological observations. Okay, meteorological observations. So Howard liked clouds and weather, which is actually part of meteorology, right? Uh, since he was a very young boy, right? He kept notes on the weather for 30 years. He worked on that particular concept for 30 years. Next. So in 1802 and 1803, he produced a paper in which he named the clouds, or to be more precise, classified them, claiming that it was possible to identify several simple categories within the various and complex cloud forms. Okay. So this means, between the years 1802 and 1803, he wrote a paper where he gave names to clouds. Okay, he said that you could sort all the different and complicated types of clouds into a few simple groups. Okay, the next one. As was standard practice for the classification of plant and animal species, they were given Latin names, which meant that the system could be understood throughout the Europe. So what does this mean? So like how scientists name plants and animals. Howard used Latin names for clouds. This helped the people all over the Europe understand and use this system. Okay, because Latin was the common language for science then. So Howard believed that all clouds belonged to three distinct groups: cumulus, stratus, and cirrus. He added a fourth category, nimbus. Okay, this is the sentence. Let's discuss these two sentences together. They're so easy to understand, right? Yeah. So he thought that the clouds could be put into three clear groups, which he called cumulus, stratus, and cirrus. He made a fourth group called nimbus for clouds that were turning into rain, hail, or snow. Nimbus is the one which can cause rain, hail, or snow. The next one, it is by observing how clouds change color and shape that weather can be predicted. And as long as the first three types of cloud keep their normal shape, there won't be any rain. So this means by looking at how clouds change their color and shape, people can guess what the weather will be like. If the cumulus, stratus, and cirrus clouds look normal, it perhaps won't be any rain. Okay. The system came to be used across the European continent, and in the 20th century, his cloud classification system was adopted with some additions as the international standard. Okay, his way of naming clouds became popular all over Europe, and in the 1990s also, it was accepted worldwide as the best way to classify clouds with some extra details added. It has become so popular, typical, popular, commonly used one, right? This is what the sentence we discussed the meaning of just now. Yeah, this is the next thing. He wrote papers on barometers and theories of rain and what is probably the first textbook on weather. He can also be considered to be the father of what is now called urban climatology. Right. He also wrote about tools that measure air pressure called barometers, how rain happens, and he even wrote what might be the first book all about the weather. Right. And also people think of him as the first person to study how cities affect the weather, city stuff, city pollution, city things can affect the weather. That's the field now known as urban climatology. Howard had realized that the cities could significantly change meteorological elements. One of these he called city fog. Right, nowadays we call it smog, a combination of smoke and fog. Right, so easy to understand again. So Howard understood that cities could change important aspects of the weather, and he named one of these changes city fog. Nowadays we call this smog, which is actually a mix of smoke and fog. Okay, let's move on to answer choices. So which of the following achievements can be attributed to Luke Howard? What are the things done by Luke Howard? What are the options are actually correct based on the passage information? That's the question means. He wrote a book about barometers. So in fact, the passage is he wrote papers about barometers, not a book. A book is something longer than different from paper, right? Yeah, a research paper kind of thing. It's not a book. So A goes out. He was the first to notice the different shapes and colors of clouds. So is he the first? No. Before his the researchers, his stuff, before his stuff, arrival of his stuff, there are people who generally talk about the clouds with their colors and shapes and all, right? So he was the first to notice the different shapes and colors of clouds is not the answer, not correct answer, because the passage doesn't say he was the first to notice shapes and colors. It says that he was the first to classify them into groups. People already noticed clouds, shapes, and colors before him. They just didn't classify them. People didn't classify them. He's the first person to classify them. So B also goes out. He was the first to identify and classify different cloud forms. Yes, he's the correct option, right? He's the first person to classify. Right? The passage clearly explains that the Howard was the first person to make a system to classify clouds into groups with names. Right? Yeah. Next D. His classification system become used all over the world. Yes, it has become internationally recognized and popular. It is correct. The passage tells us that this way of classifying clouds became used across Europe and later as the international standard. So internationally it was accepted. Next, he was the first to use word smoke. No, the passage says he called it city fog, and that we now call it smoke. So he didn't use the word smoke himself. The name actually came later, right? So he must be ruled out. Finally, he realized the cities could have an effect on the weather. Yes, so cities aspects can affect the weather patterns, right? So the passage mentions, Howard understood the cities could change the weather, which is an important discovery, right? So F is also correct. Just submit. Yeah, all are correct. Okay. So the correct answers are CDF. Answer choice C is actually correct because he was the first to put the clouds into groups and name them, right? Naming them. D is also correct because his system for naming clouds was used by many people worldwide, right? And if he realized that the cities could have an effect on the weather, it is absolutely correct because he found out that cities could change things like how much fog there is going to be something, that's all, right? Yeah. For more videos, please subscribe to this channel. So we meet in the other video with better passage with more difficulty level.